Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Ottumwa City Council meeting. It's 5:30, so I'm going to call the meeting to order. And first thing on the agenda, if everybody would stand, we're going to do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay. Chris will take roll call.
Councilmember Galloway?
Here.
Councilmember McIntyre?
Here.
Councilmember Hull?
Here.
Councilmember Pope? Councilmember Rowe?
Here.
Mayor Johnson?
Here.
Consideration for a motion to approve consent agenda items number B1 through B22.
Do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Chris will take the roll.
Councilmember Galloway?
Yes.
Councilmember McIntyre?
Yes.
Councilmember Hull?
Yes.
Councilmember Rowe?
Yes.
Okay, the next thing is the approval of our agenda tonight. Do we have a motion to approve tonight's agenda?
Make a motion to approve tonight's agenda.
Second.
Chris will take the roll.
Councilmember Galloway?
Yes.
Councilmember McIntyre?
Yes.
Councilmember Hull?
Yes.
Councilmember Rowe?
Yes.
Next on the agenda is Phil's city administrator report, so I'll turn it over to Phil.
I was advised that we were going to have a presentation tonight, and they were not able to attend. So I did not have anything additional for tonight's agenda.
Okay. At this point, I'll ask if there's anyone in the audience that would want to speak on any of the agenda items on our agenda tonight. We have a couple people that want to speak later on non-agenda items later in our meeting, but is there anybody now that wants to address any of the agenda items that is on tonight's agenda? Yes, sir. Would you state your name and your address, please?
Sure. Kurt Hopkins, address is 6422 189th Street, Albee, Iowa. And just want to speak on behalf just about the development, the agreement that we have with the city. And wanted to just kind of talk briefly about that. Just wanted to thank the city for bringing that forward on the development agreement. And I'm appreciative of that as a local Ottumwa resident for over 40 years. I know there's been a little bit of pushback on the county side from that, but I just want to say thank you to you guys for bringing this forward, looking at it tonight as it's a critical piece for us as we look to develop the Coles lot. When we're going out, we're looking for tenants for this building. We're competing against other towns as well. You know, the national tenants are looking at other towns outside of us. So when we can provide an opportunity to have some kind of a tax incentive for those guys to come in, it makes us that much more competitive in the marketplace. So I just wanted to say thank you for that. We've got 3 of the tenants identified. We are signing leases with those folks this week. We've already signed 2 of them. We have 2 more tenants for the potential space that's left. We got 2,400 square feet left in the building. Spoke with a real estate broker this morning, and we have possibility of splitting that space in half for a retail tenant and another service provider. So we're making good progress there on the rest of the building, but just want to give you a quick update on that. So I don't know if anybody has any questions for me.
Does council have any questions for Kurt?
Will he be available later when it comes up on the agenda?
Yes,
Okay, thank you.
you bet.
Consideration of acknowledgement settlement agreement between the City of Ottumwa and BW Gas and Convenience Retail, LLC, doing business as Yesway Store 1014 at 502 West 2nd Street. Recommendation: authorize the mayor to sign the order assessing penalty, first violation, and the acknowledgement settlement agreement with BW Gas and Convenience Retail, LLC, doing business as Yesway Store 1014 at 502 West 2nd Street.
Do we have a motion to approve the recommendation?
Move the recommendation as presented.
Second.
Chris will take the roll.
Councilmember Galloway?
Yes.
Councilmember McIntyre?
Yes.
Councilmember Hull?
Yes.
Councilmember Rowe?
Yes.
Bid report to reject bid received on Green Street Sewer Improvement Project. Recommendation, reject bid received on Green Street Sewer Improvement Project.
Do we have a motion to approve the recommendation?
Move the recommendation as presented.
Second.
And then Larry, I think you had a little bit of information you wanted to share before we take roll call.
Thanks, Mayor, Council. The bid for Green Street Storm Sewer Extension was significantly higher than the opinion of probable cost. After reviewing bid items and having discussions with both the contractor and the design engineer, we believe we have some options in material and design changes. During our discussion, it became apparent that we are experiencing extensive price increases across the board for material. As an example, in 2020, we pulled from our Phase 8 design bid, we pulled the 48-inch reinforced concrete pipe cost. At that time, it was $89.02 a linear foot. This year, the pipe cost was quoted as $262.60 plus a $10 upcharge for the gasket. The same trend held true for our cast pipe, and I listed the prices there for your review. Our plan would be to revisit the design and look at alternate material selections and then evaluate the options to combine this project with other projects that we're doing in our phase, maybe to do a larger scoped project and possibly and we'll evaluate that as we go through timing and working with the railroad. Bids were received and opened by the City of Ottumwa on March 23rd, 2022 at 2 p.m. One bid was received from Langman Construction of Rock Island in the amount of $1,793,486.50. This bid is significantly higher than our opinion of $930,000, and staff is recommending reject the bid.
Larry, is the reason for the price increase just a product of the economy, or is this just something that the lone bidder increased prices on?
After actually talking to different suppliers and different contracts and looking at the bids throughout the state, it's more of a supply and demand.
Okay, thanks.
The council have any other questions for Larry? If not, Chris will take the roll.
Councilmember Galloway?
Yes.
Councilmember McIntyre?
Yes.
Councilmember Hull?
Yes.
Councilmember Rowe?
Yes.
Okay, we have 9 public hearings tonight, so we'll get started with those.
This is the time, place, and date set for a public hearing on the proposed adoption of Amendment Number 1 to the Wildwood Drive Highway 34 Urban Renewal Plan in the City of Ottumwa, State of Iowa.
I'll go ahead and open the public hearing, and I believe Zach's going to carry the discussion on this.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. So we did discuss this a little bit when we had the resolution last week. This resolution this resolution, if adopted, would add Amendment 1 to the Wildwood Drive Highway 34 Urban Renewal Plan. Amendment 1 adds no new land to the urban renewal area and makes no changes to established base valuations. It does add 2 projects to the urban renewal plan, and a project allows the city to use certain urban renewal powers to execute that project. The 2 projects that are added, the first one's pretty boilerplate. It's something we're adding to everything when we interact with it, is adding a project that now empowers the city to apply tax increment from the district to recover planning, engineering, attorney fees incurred by establishing the plan. That's just kind of a responsible way to fund this type of work. But the second project is a little bit bigger. It does allow for incentives for the construction of an anticipated $2.15 million multi-tenant retail strip center on Outlot 1 of the Wildwood Center subdivision. That's the lot that's in front of and beside Kohl's. The incentives that are described in here would be the maximum. If you do consider a development agreement that has anything up to what's included in this, then that would be something that we could use the urban renewal powers for. The maximum that's set here is also what's in the development agreement you would consider later, which is an upfront economic development grant of $75,000 at the time the project is completed. The money for that is included right now in the CIP, as well as a partial tax rebate for a period of 8 years, not to exceed $475,000. That 8-year rebate schedule is 100% for years 1 and 2 and 80% for years 3 through 8. That 20% that we do recover during that period is based on the minimum assessment agreement, is meant to recover the $75,000 that we would pay up front. And I'll talk a little bit about the minimum assessment agreement with the development agreement later on. The Plan and Zoning Commission did vote at the March 7th meeting, so last month, that Amendment 1 is in conformance with the city's plan for development as a whole. Taxing entities were invited to participate in a consultation meeting on March 21st, and a representative from the county did participate, and the minutes of that meeting were included in the packet. The county also returned a letter, which was included in your packet as well, where they did state some objections to using tax increment financing for the project, and a response is something the city is required to send to that. So I also did write and send a response, which was included in your packet. To go into that a little bit, tax increment financing is a tool that empowers the city to leverage the future value of improvements to provide incentives for those improvements now. We lock in the base valuation at the time of the urban renewal plan. So whatever the valuation was in 2011 is the base valuation for that property. And anything above that base valuation, the value of any improvements, is called the increment. And we're able to capture certain taxes paid on the increment. There's taxes paid on the increment that we cannot capture. Those are the school's physical improvement levy, as well as any of the debt service levies for any taxing entities. This would create new revenue for debt service and for school improvements, even on the increment. But for any other levies, we are able to capture those, and we're able to use those to do certain urban renewal activities, including economic development grants, either in the form of the upfront payment or in the form of tax rebates. The rebate is meant to be something that can close the gap between what it costs to finance or develop a project and what that project is ultimately worth. $2.15 million for the project is expensive. It's hard to cash flow that, and the developer does approach the city, as Kurt did in this case, to try to close the gap and to get a project like this off the ground. Part of why Plan and Zoning did recommend that the amendment is in conformance with the city's plan is because they looked at the comprehensive plan, which first of all identified this area as suitable for this land use. A priority in this area would be continuing the retail type use, but also because maintaining our position as a regional hub for retail and for service is a stated goal in the comprehensive plan, and new development in that area is consistent with forwarding that goal. I guess the last thing I'll add is that new retail does create and retain jobs. There's been some conversation on Facebook about how some of the tenant, or at least one of the tenants in this development, is a tenant that would be moving out of the mall. The reality is that happens sometimes, and we have to either adapt to provide a space that's suitable for that tenant, or we could see them leave town altogether. So both attracting and retaining jobs is an appropriate use here. It also does produce secondary benefits such as sales tax, and it improves quality of life.
Does council have any questions for Zach?
Questions, but I think it's in regards to the next action item.
Since this is a public hearing, is there anyone in the audience that has any questions for Mr. Simonson?
I guess I do have one quick just comment, question, whatever. Right now, correct me if I'm wrong, Zach, but we're collecting about $38 a year in property taxes off of this lot.
Is that what your
roughly?
check is, Kurt? Yep.
So with the $2.15 million valuation, the 100% taken off the top the first 2 years, the next 8 years, we cash flow that about $9,000 a year for each of those years after that. So if this property weren't being built, then we're going to get $38 a year.
Right.
Okay.
And we'll, even in those years where it's 100% rebate, we will get our debt service levy and things like that on the value of the improvements. So there is a bit of tax relief built into this, even in those 100% rebate years.
And clearly that's not inclusive of the local option sales tax that we would get during that time with the addition of the business.
Correct. And that $75,000 part of it, and actually, maybe I should save this for the development agreement conversation, because this is just about the amendment to the renewal. So I'll come back to that.
Any other comments or questions? If not, I'd entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Chris will take the roll.
Councilmember Galloway?
Yes.
Councilmember McIntyre?
Yes.
Councilmember Hull?
Yes.
Councilmember Rowe?
Yes.
Resolution number 74, 2022, determining an area of the city to be an economic development area and that the rehabilitation, conservation, redevelopment, development, or a combination thereof of such area is necessary in the interest of the public health, safety, or welfare of the residents of the city, designating such area as appropriate for urban renewal projects, and adopting Amendment Number 1 to the Wildwood Drive Highway 34 Economic Development Urban Renewal Area. Recommendation: pass and adopt resolution number 74, 2022.
Is there a motion to approve the recommendation?
So moved.
Second.
Chris will take the roll.
Councilmember Galloway?
Oh, just a second. I'm confirming. We're just still on this.
We're voting on 74, 2022.
Okay. Sorry. I thought I got it. Yes.
Councilmember McIntyre?
Yes.
Councilmember Hull?
Yes.
Councilmember Rowe?
Yes.
This is the time, place, and date set for a public hearing on the matter of the proposal to enter into a development agreement with Hopkins Properties LLC.
I'll go ahead and open the public hearing, and I believe Zach is also going to cover this.
Right, thank you, Mayor. Just again, to summarize the terms of the agreement, the minimum improvements are a $2.1 million, 10,000 square foot, single story, multi-tenant commercial building with the jobs requirement to staff that building. A 1 year vacancy of that building could constitute default of the agreement. In exchange for the minimum improvements, the city would provide a one-time $75,000 economic development grant at the time the minimum improvements are complete. Funds for that grant, again, are included in the CIP, and eight consecutive annual economic development grants, which rebate the tax increment paid on the development according to that rebate schedule before 100% for years 1 and 2, 80% for years 3 through 6, rebates not to exceed $475,000. The only other thing I'll add to this is a little bit of a background on the minimum assessment agreement, because that is a tool that captures or that helps to protect the city's interests in recovering, especially that $75,000. We gave to the county assessor a minimum assessment agreement related to the value of the minimum improvements, and that was already signed, which if we do execute the development agreement with that minimum assessment agreement, that locks in the value at no less than $2.1 million. The assessor said the minimum improvements are worth at least $2.1 million and is guaranteed that they will be assessed at $2.1 million for the duration of the agreement. That ensures that the taxes paid are sufficient for us to capture return on what we funded in the beginning. I think that's good. I can leave it open for discussion at that.
Does council have any questions for Zach?
I will just say one thing. So that Councilperson Rowe asked about the taxes. So the current assessed value of that property is only $125,000. So we're increasing the minimum assessed by at least $2 million. So
Right.
Correct. And then we would be capturing the future taxes on that new $2 million valuation during this agreement. So for those first 2 years, you had about 100%, or 100% was projected to go back. Roughly, that'd be about $95,000. Now that includes all the debt service and everything else that we would carve out of all this. So total tax rate, what we're looking at for next year, be about $95,000 in taxes of new value that's added. So in future years, that's almost $100,000 of new value created from this property. Zach had mentioned the $75,000 upfront as part of this, but we would look to capture that over those years 3 through 8, until that was captured. And then that rest of that 20% would go back to the city, the county, anyone else that was there. And then after year 8, 100% of new value would be shared between those entities. So almost $100,000 shared between all of those entities, in addition to the local option sales tax, and the anything else that would benefit there.
Okay, so I have a few questions. I have a couple questions for you, Zach, I think, and then I have a question for the developer. So Zach, we have some buildings that aren't filled, correct? We have a lot of buildings in Ottumwa that aren't filled. We just built a new building over by Walmart that T-Mobile's in, and then there's another building next to, or addition, that's not filled. Then we have the K's that isn't filled. So my question, or I guess my concern is, I understand bringing in new buildings, we bring other places in, and maybe there's concerns with rent in other areas, but what do we do with these empty buildings? Because it's great to have all these other new places in, but when you drive into town and you see all these empty buildings, that leaves a sour taste on people too. So
Yeah. I think that answer has a few, or that question has a few answers. The first one is that the market's kind of dictating here. Those buildings are there. They were available for these tenants. They weren't interested. Either keeping or bringing these tenants here required a space they were interested in. And that's just to say that we can't solve the problem of bringing some particular business here with just the inventory we have. What we do need then is strategies, ideas, ways of using those existing buildings differently. One thing that's even included in the housing ordinance later is looking at how we're going to try to incorporate mixed use into the area where we have vacant buildings. Trying to be more flexible about the types of uses that'll be allowed in those buildings is something that'll be helpful. Another is just having the resources. Being a community that is perceived as development friendly is helpful. Being a community that is making investments that will pay off down the road is helpful, and allowing us to kind of leverage more opportunities with those buildings. I definitely would love it if everybody was staying where they were or moving into the buildings we have now. But that's obviously not the case, and we want to at least still stay competitive, but it is a bigger question that takes more time to solve. We can't tell people where to go. We can only tell them we want them in town, right?
thank you. And I guess, I don't know, maybe this is more of a Phil question too, but so if we approve this TIF tonight, we'll have 5 current ones, correct?
Development agreements.
Well, there's some current projects with development agreements, and TIF is utilized as parts of those.
Yeah, sorry.
So probably the more recent ones, I'd say that calculation within the last couple of years, there's about 5. There's some other ones that are, we already have active that are ongoing. But yeah, so was that the question, or?
Well, I guess my question is, and you and I kind of had this conversation, and so maybe this is more of a public knowledge question too, but at what point do we say we have too many, or at what point are there too many of them?
So
Maybe there aren't, I don't know.
yeah, that's like asking someone if they have enough to eat or too many shoes, or something like that. It's whatever you feel is an adequate amount, as long as we're able to support the amount that's there. As it was pointed out, right now that piece of property is getting $38 in tax revenue. We're going to already gain more towards the debt service. The schools will get more towards their PEPL. So there's some things that will add value to right away off of the new value. That'll be new taxes coming in. And then within a couple of years, we're going to get 20% of that new valuation. And then after a short 8 years, which will be here before we know it, it'll be 100% of new value, plus the other benefits, like I said, with the commercial development that we get. It shows that we're open to development as a community. I think it helps encourage and spur additional growth and development when we can have these kinds of projects, whether that's in commercial, it's in housing. We're continually trying to find new ways and new programs. So whatever the appetite of the council is at the time, whatever the appetite of the public is, I think is as much as we're able to do and can continue to do.
Okay, and then one final question, and this is for Mr. Hopkins. I don't think as a council we would be doing our due diligence if we didn't ask. We asked the contractor for Bonita too, but if we didn't approve this tonight, would you still be able to build, or would you still be willing to build?
Yeah, the answer is yes. I'm an Ottumwa guy, been here for years. I own that lot and I need to get something done on it. I've owned it for 4 or 5 years now. And I think it's going to be good for the town. I have a lot of other businesses here in town and it's going to benefit. We're all going to benefit from this happening. And back to a couple of comments about some frustrations maybe with someone leaving the mall. I mean, I'm having conversations with these guys firsthand. They're going to leave. I mean, you've lost some other people out of the mall. The mall's not working anymore for them. So it's critical path that we do this, so I have mixed emotions about that too. As a developer of taking a current business out of the mall, I don't love gutting the mall. That's not what I'm after. And that's not my goal, but if it comes between us losing someone like that, I'm going to do it, and I'm an Ottumwa guy. I don't want to see anything else leave here. We've seen some businesses leave that we need. So that's a key thing. And one comment for me about the development agreements, it's key for you guys to do these things. I can't encourage you enough to do that. I have 2 of them with the city of Newton myself right now. It's when a developer goes to town, it's getting harder and harder to do these projects. I mean, I'm on the phone with Maurice's and they said, well, you're one of the few guys that's doing a ground up project right now. It's because I'm having people like you help me do these things. It's not happening in a lot of other towns. It's getting too expensive to do these things, harder and harder to do them. So, yeah, I would do it. It's a lot easier with your help and it's a lot less risky probably for me. It's risky for me to do this. I'm a local guy. I'm not a big, huge company that owns them all. I'm a small guy from Ottumwa, Iowa originally, and I have a pile of cash backing me up. And I'm putting my family in harm's way when I'm taking a loan this size. So yeah, and I promise you that I'm not going to leave that building sitting empty. I'm a guy that's going to get it filled. I'm on the hook. I got a commitment to my lender. And I've got to do that. I've got to get the building filled up. So I'm not going to be a guy that's going to sit back on his haunches and wait. So I can promise you I'm not, I won't leave the building set empty. I'll do everything I can to perform on it. So
I guess I have one more question. I'm sorry.
yeah, go for it.
My next question, I guess, kind of a follow-up. So if we didn't approve this tonight, what is and then you said you would do this. And I think I've also heard that you want to develop more and kind of branch out. Would you have the ability to be able to develop more if you were on the hook if we didn't approve this tonight?
I would. Yeah. I mean, I try to be aggressive. Part of you doing this for me though also helps me be able to do more. That's all the more ability that I have to go do these things. And I'm focused on this town more than I am a lot of other ones. I grew up here. I graduated high school here. I want to see things happen here. I see the stuff on Facebook. I see all the comments. I understand those things. I know what you guys are facing, but I'm also a guy that believes in this town, and yeah, I'm looking at another lot right now that we could develop. I'm talking to other places that want to come here potentially. And, I'll aggressively pursue those guys, but these things that you're doing for me helps me have the tools in my toolkit to go do those things, and will I come back and ask for help again? I probably will. It's what you have to have as a developer to do these things. And I know I'm not the first guy that's been up here to talk to you about a development agreement. These are the things that are happening in towns around here. They have to happen. If you can't, I know I'm repeating myself with that, but it's really tough. Concrete went up $45 a yard in the last month. I mean, it's getting hard to do. Supply chain issues are happening. It's making things more expensive. We all know that, but I'm a pro Ottumwa guy. I want to see us succeed. I want to bring more sales tax, more jobs here. That's my goal. It's not to come in here and try to get free money from you and walk off into the sunset or sell the building a year later and make a bunch of money to line my pocket. That's not me. So.
And you currently have 2 buildings already here in town?
I think I have 5.
Okay, thank you.
Maybe 6. Yep.
Okay.
Okay.
I really don't have any more questions.
All right. Thanks.
I got a comment, Kurt, if you can stay up there a second.
Yeah.
I'm learning a lot just here tonight, so I appreciate your enthusiasm and I appreciate that you made the comment that you understand what we're facing too as a city.
Yep.
Because we're taking a risk also, and we're speaking on behalf of the citizens. So we're taking that risk too, and I'm all for helping people, and I'm closer to being on board with this project too. But after the Bonita deal, and then we are going to open a can of worms for you entrepreneurs out there to keep coming, and then there's going to be a point where okay, we got to do something as a council to say, okay, when are we going to reap this? Because this town really can't wait 10 years to start getting more tax money in here. So I appreciate you understanding where we're coming from too. I really do.
Absolutely. And I appreciate that. I get it. I understand.
Just a quick comment. I'm completely repeating myself from the Bonita project and from a couple of other TIF projects that we've done in the past. But, in the economy that this nation is in right now, TIF, tax rebatements, tax abatements, that has become commonplace. And this community, if we don't look to the future instead of looking behind us, we're going to get stuck in a trap where we do continue to decline as a community. I think that a lot of the growth that we have seen, at least in the retail sector, and in some cases even the industrial sector here in the last 3 or 4 years, has been a direct result of this tax increment financing and tax abatement. So while I understand that a lot of people think that, we shouldn't be doing this sort of thing, should we be judicious about the way that we're doing it? Should we look at these projects and make sure that we're protecting the taxpayer in the process? Absolutely. We wouldn't be doing our jobs if we weren't doing that. But at the same time, we're competing. We're in a really interesting spot in the state of Iowa, where somebody can go to Waukee or they can go to Urbandale and be handed tax abatements for the next 20 years for projects. They could go down to Burlington and be handed tax abatements for the next 20 years on projects, but they're coming and looking at Ottumwa, Iowa, who's right in between those two places. They're asking, for 10 years or for 5 years, whatever the case may be. And, in that 1980s mentality of no, everybody needs to pay their own fair share of taxes, what happens? We lose that tax revenue for the future. We lose all the people coming to the quote unquote regional hub that everybody in the early 2000s was so proud of Ottumwa for saying we are the regional hub. But if we keep saying no to some of these incentives that are coming, that are available to us to use, then we're no longer the regional hub. Burlington's the regional hub, or Des Moines steals the rest of the business away from Ottumwa, Iowa. So again, we need to be judicious about this, but at the same time, we need to think about the bigger picture. And this is what helps us grow. This is what actually drives down the property tax revenue or the property tax expense for the average citizen of Ottumwa. This is, everybody talks about how, there's nothing in Ottumwa. Well, here's a chance for something to be in Ottumwa. We have the responsibility, at least as much as possible, to make sure that happens.
Just real quick to kind of piggyback on that point, the tax increment financing is one of those tools that we have to kind of help level the playing field. Now, aside from communities that are giving 10 or 20 years or whatever, they're doing the same thing, one of the advantages like an Urbandale has is that proximity to the metro. So they have the nightlife. They have some of those amenities that we may not have to that same level. So when you're trying to attract people to live, you're trying to attract people to start a business, some of those things we can't offer. So if we can at least make it affordable for them to be able to build and to continue to grow in those things, that's where this tool does help with that. I've heard my kids talking about Pella getting a Chick-fil-A. And why don't we have that here? And, it's not to say that we won't ever have a Chick-fil-A for them or whatever else, but that proximity to the metro is one of the reasons I'm sure they got that. I don't know if they gave any incentives or anything beyond that, but that does help. So location is one of those things. We need to be able to build what we have here so that we can continue to get and to grow and to have people that are interested in wanting to develop here. And so I guess that's one thing I just want to mention there too.
Totally agree. I mean, I've done a couple deals. I did one in Altoona right next to Adventureland, and they wanted some houses torn down. There were, an eyesore right next to the Walmart. A partner of mine and I went in there and Very first thing they did was offer a certificate agreement to buy those homes, to help us buy the homes, level them out, create a development agreement there. And it's all developed now. You can drive by there, those ratty houses are gone. You know, Des Moines offering those things, but you know, and it's that much, you're right. You've got to be more aggressive in these urban markets in order to grab some of these national account people to get them here, because when I go to the table with a company, I can at least say, okay, now I know what your taxes are going to be for the next X amount of years. And then they look at that against their pro forma and how they can operate their business. It's everything to them. They know they can be very profitable for that first 8 to 10 years. It's going to pay off their build out that they have. And then from there on, they can afford to pay more because their build out is paid for. You know, it's kind of an upfront payment for you guys. I know a little bit of pain for this, but in the end, it ends up being good for everybody. And I think it's smart in where you're headed. I know it's scary. I know it's new territory for the town too, but it's a critical path for us, I think, for growth in the future and bringing in new blood. And back to your comment about some of the buildings, it's when these national guys come to look at these towns, I mean, they're going to fight over the spot. I mean, if they wanted to be up there next to T-Mobile, they would be there. I had 2 of them in a dogfight over a location in this strip center. One of them paid $10 more a square foot to be on the end cap versus the other one, just because that's how critical they feel about location when they come to look at Ottumwa. So that all plays a factor. So I don't know if that's all I got.
I think we got to keep some importances in mind here. You know, we're not looking at a 10-year 100% tax rebate or whatever to Mr. Hopkins. We're looking at 8 years, first 2 years at 100%, the next years are at 80%. So for 6 years, we're going to get some sort of tax revenue from this building. We're increasing this property by $2 million in tax valuation. You're going to get the debt services. You're going to get the lost revenue from that. This isn't just a simple, you know, we're giving away. We're not handing him a bunch of money and say, here, go build this building. That's not what we're doing. We're giving him an incentive to build this building and making it a little easier for him to do this. And, you know, whether we take a business out of the mall or not, I wish we wouldn't, but you know, like you said, they're going to leave anyway. So we might as well do something to keep them here. We've lost way too many businesses to just, we don't want to be here no more. We don't want to be here. So, you know, and you know, one of the great things about this is you're a local guy. You know, we've talked about this before. Like, I'm glad you're putting your money back in the community. You're hiring local. You're going to spend your money here. You're going to reinvest in our community. And that's one of the reasons I don't have a problem with giving a little bit of an incentive to a company like yours, because I know you're going to spend that money right back here in the community. You're going to reinvest it here. So, you know, those are the things that I look for when these TIF agreements come down is, you know, how much are we giving you and over what period of time are we giving it to you? But not only where is that workforce coming from, where is the people that are going to be doing this job? So I really appreciate you doing all that for the community to bring in that local help and do that and keep your money here. So
You bet. One last comment for you too. We're getting ready to expand the Pizza Ranch. We're working on bringing our plans through the city for that as well. And we're looking at a $950,000 investment there in that expansion. And we're not asking for help with that. We know our taxes are going to go up when we put that building up and expand it. And so I don't know, probably maybe it makes you feel a little bit better that, you know, we're going to be paying a lot more taxes out there too here pretty soon, because we're going to put another $1 million in that building. So we believe in Ottumwa. I got a lot of money invested here. I believe in the town and the people that run it. And I'm thankful you guys are doing what you do. So.
Does council have any other questions for Mr. Hopkins or Zach? Is anyone in the audience have any questions for Mr. Hopkins or Mr. Simonson? Would you come to the microphone and introduce yourself and your address, please, for the record?
Bradley Grief, 723 Wildwood Drive, just a couple blocks up the road. One of the biggest complaints I've got about living where I live is that I live in an island of no sidewalks, and there are a bunch of people that walk up and down Wildwood Drive and bike up and down Wildwood Drive. I think that we need to start somewhere. I know it'll be an island, but I think any new development over there needs to have sidewalks that are for the public use, for transportation, not just for internal circulation. Like Altoona.
Thank you. Zach, do you have any other comments or anything you want to make?
Yeah, the first thing I'll say before I get to what Brad said is just because I'll be looking for the answer to Brad's question. The first thing I'll say is that something that we hear a fair amount is, the city goes to TIF all the time as a first choice or whatever. And that's what happens when the things that come up for votes or the things that come up for consultation meetings are only the agreements that make it that far. There are a lot of times that I get calls from developers. I try to vet them. I listen to them. I find out what the project is. And those things go on a long time before we ever talk about incentives. And there's a lot of projects that get left on the floor before we even talk about what we'll give people. There's a lot of work that goes into it. We don't offer a rebate to the first person that knocks on the door. We're serious and we're careful about the projects. As far as to answer Brad's question, there is a sidewalk that's part of the project. It is closer to something where it is beneficial to internal circulation. It connects the development to the Coles area. But I think Wildwood specifically, and I think part of our retail specifically, strategy specifically, it should be geared toward more pedestrian interaction. We didn't add something that would necessarily connect directly to Wildwood or set up the ability to do that beyond having the internal circulation lets you get from this development safely to Coles. But that's something that I would like the council to see as we continue to do development. I'd also like to see the council look at Wildwood Drive as a priority for pedestrian traffic as well. I had to get a tire changed at Walmart recently, and it was longer than I thought, so I walked to Culver's, and that was probably one of the scarier walks I've ever had because it's not a very safe place to walk along Venture Drive either. So that's all I've got.
Okay. I'd ask for a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Chris will take the roll.
Councilmember Galloway?
Yes.
Councilmember McIntyre?
Yes.
Councilmember Hull?
Yes.
Councilmember Rowe?
Yes.
Resolution number 75, 2022, approving and authorizing execution of a development agreement by and between the City of Ottumwa and Hopkins Properties LLC. Recommendation pass and adopt resolution number 75, 2022.
Do we have a motion to approve the recommendation?
So moved.
Second.
Chris will take the roll.
Councilmember Galloway?
Yes.
Councilmember McIntyre?
Yes.
Councilmember Hull?
Yes.
Councilmember Rowe?
Yes.
This is the time, place, and date set for a public hearing on the matter of the proposed authorization of a lease purchase agreement in the principal amount of not to exceed $25,000 for the acquisition and equipping of a refueler truck for the airport, a general corporate purpose between the City of Ottumwa and AV Fuel Corporation for fueling services at the Ottumwa Regional Airport.
I'll open the public hearing, and I believe, Phil, you're going to take this one.
Yes. So this lease in particular is capturing continued supply of the aviation fuel to Ottumwa Regional Airport. The airport has been receiving its fuel from AvFuel since prior to us taking on that operations, and that continued. They have a fueling truck, which is then used to be able to fuel planes that I guess decide not to taxi over to the fuel tank, and so we can provide fuel on site to those aircraft. The truck has been looked at by our fleet committee, has been made it through inspection. There are not a lot of fuel trucks out there as far as for purchase. This is a 3-year deal that would be a monthly lease of about $583 a month. And at the end of that 3 years, then the city would be able to purchase that for $1. We believe that it has been recommended for approval by the Airport Board of Supervisors, and staff believes this is the best option for us, and would be able to continue that agreement not only with AvFuel for the fuel, but to acquire that fueling truck.
Does council have any questions for Phil? Hearing none, does anyone in the audience have any questions for Mr. Rath? If not, I'd entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Chris will take the roll.
Councilmember Galloway?
Yes.
Councilmember McIntyre?
Yes.
Councilmember Hull?
Yes.
Councilmember Rowe?
Yes.
Resolution number 83, 2022, instituting proceedings to take additional action for the authorization of a lease purchase agreement in the principal amount of not to exceed $25,000 for the acquisition and equipping of a refueler truck for the airport for a general corporate purpose. Recommendation: pass and adopt resolution number 83, 2022.
Move the recommendations presented.
Second.
Chris will take the roll.
Councilmember Galloway?
Yes.
Councilmember McIntyre?
Yes.
Councilmember Hull?
Yes.
Councilmember Rowe?
Yes.
This is the time, place, and date set for a public hearing on the disposal of city-owned property described as Lot 11 and Block 3 of the Blake Park addition to the city of Ottumwa, Wapello County, Iowa, commonly known as 817 Chester Avenue.
I'll go ahead and open the public hearing, and I believe Zach's going to do the presentation.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council. Rippling Waters offered $125 for the vacant lot at 817 Chester. They intend to place a Homes for Iowa house on the lot and will sign a development agreement agreeing to construct the new home within 3 years. They actually plan to have that home arrive the week of July 4th. As a nonprofit developer, Rippling Waters is entitled to the $125 price for city-owned lots for development. The resolution would authorize the sale.
Does council have any questions for Zach?
I'll just have one for you, Zach.
Yeah.
Did we do it right this time?
Well, we didn't do
Like,
that.
is everything set? So if we approve this, we're set to go?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, this is the second time you've heard this resolution. The notice wasn't in the paper the first time.
Okay.
I thought Councilman was talking about the house that got delivered
Oh,
Homes
no,
for
no,
Iowa
no,
today
no,
and
no,
got
no.
got stuck for a little bit. That home got unstuck. It's in sound condition. It'll be delivered next couple days.
Does anyone in the audience have any questions for Mr. Simonson? Hearing none, I would ask for a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Chris will take the roll.
Councilmember Galloway?
Yes.
Councilmember McIntyre?
Yes.
Councilmember Hull?
Yes.
Councilmember Rowe?
Yes.
Resolution number 87, 2022, accepting the offer and approving the sale of city-owned property commonly known as 817 Chester Avenue to Rippling Waters for $125. Recommendation: pass and adopt resolution number 87, 2022.
Move the recommendation as presented.
Second.
Chris will take the roll.
Councilmember Galloway?
Yes.
Councilmember McIntyre?
Yes.
Councilmember Hull?
Yes.
Councilmember Rowe?
Yes.
This is the time, place, and date set for a public hearing on the application to the Iowa Economic Development Authority for a community development block grant from COVID-19 program.
I'll go ahead and open the public hearing, and I believe Zach's going to handle this presentation as well.
Thank you, Mayor. Brad Grief from Area 15 Regional Planning is going to speak a little bit about this project first.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Again, I'm Brad Grief from Area 15 Regional Planning Commission. This is a, there we go, similar grant program that you've seen before. We just got the facade grant a couple months ago. You just had a public hearing a couple weeks ago for STAR Workforce Development. This is another opportunity within that umbrella to do upper story housing conversion programs, and upper story housing conversion is one of those activities that's eligible. So we can get up to $500,000 in CDBG funds for these projects. They're on a first come, first served basis, and the housing and facades are due by the end of the month. So we just kind of squeaking by with this one. These projects have to be, again, rapid action projects that need to be done by July of next year. And we've actually got lucky that we got this project on a property that is about 6 months ahead of the construction schedule that we originally thought. So that's why we're rushing to get this in. You approved your housing and community development housing needs assessment on March 15th, which identified housing, affordable housing and downtown revitalization as needs for both low to moderate income people and for the community at large. This project will serve those mutual goals, and it'll help you work toward that 500 new houses or housing units by 2030 goal that the city and Legacy Foundation have come out within their 2022 housing plan. So the project is a pretty familiar building downtown. Had a facade improvement back in 2013 to 2016. It was owned by a property owner who didn't treat it very well. So the city took possession of it from the 657A program in 2019, and RG Properties acquired it from the city through a development agreement in 2020. They have to date invested over $200,000 in the cleaning and demolition of this building. It looked like this back in 2020. It was a hole in the wall, literally. The owner had stripped off the roofing membrane and left it there for 4 years, saturating, and it ended up collapsing on itself. So that's part of why the city took possession of that building. But it looks like that yesterday. Yeah. So in the interior, over the last year or so, they've been stripping everything out of there. On the upper level, it's pretty much bare walls at this point. The architect and Rod of RG Construction have designed to pretty much keep the walls where they are. They just needed new everything, new HVAC, new electrical, plumbing, whatever you want to call it. So the proposed project's going to put 2 one-bedroom units in the back and 1 two-bedroom unit in the front. The estimated total cost of this project right now, as we see it, is $604,000 based on estimates developed with Rod Curtis, the architect. This is pretty in line with what we've seen for these types of projects recently. The local match for the project available, we estimate to be $104,000 with $15,000 coming from the city, so $5,000 a unit, which is standard for what the city's done for the last several years on grant match projects. And then $89,000 coming from the owner for a total request of $500,000 from the grant. As a condition of this project, the units have to be rented to low to moderate income people for the first 3 years, which again, I think in the location's really good with the high school being down there. All your first year teachers, again, me when I came to this town, would have been eligible to live in those spaces. So it's not Section 8 housing that you're looking at. So 100% of the federal funding will be benefiting those low to moderate income people for at least that first 3 years. And then after that, they can do whatever they want. Again, both the upper and lower levels and the basement are vacant. So no people or businesses are going to be displaced. If there's any construction or whatever, they're going to minimize any kind of impact on the neighbors as well. So there's kind of what you're looking at. The back there is where the decks are, and the front there is that 2-bedroom unit. We're going to try to get this application submitted on or before next Friday because they're due in 2 weeks after that. But we're competing against other people and also myself. So.
Is there ever any requirements with any of these CDBG funds that these buildings have to be handicapped accessible, like where they require the developer to put in elevators or anything?
No, that's all. Not, especially not on the upper story housing. We do and have gotten lucky with a few of these projects in the past, like 117, 119 East Main has elevators, and 211 East 2nd has a the access from the back that you can walk up. So there are some accessible units that have come out of these, but
Does council have any questions for either Zach or Brad?
Brad, your pictures don't do that justice, by the way.
I'm usually better at that.
So to confirm, you're asking the city for
15.
15,000, correct?
And just as a fun fact, 2 buildings across the street, 44 feet of frontage, 0.16 acres. In 2015, similar thing happened. Were valued at 22,808 in 2015. And after they got upper story apartments and facades put on them, they were worth 261,335, which equates to $1,352,000 an acre, which is a little bit better than that TIF you just passed. ROI, if you're asking for that.
Does anyone in the audience have any questions for Zach or Brad? Council have any other final questions? Okay, I would entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Chris will take the roll.
Councilmember Galloway?
Yes.
Councilmember McIntyre?
Yes.
Councilmember Hull?
Yes.
Councilmember Rowe?
Yes.
Resolution number 96, 2022, authorizing the mayor to sign and submit the Iowa Economic Development Authority for a community development block grant from the COVID-19 application for the ISU Building Upper Story Housing Project at 307 to 309 East Main Street, and if funded, to sign all contract-related documents. Recommendation: pass and adopt resolution number 96, 2022.
Do we have a motion to approve the recommendation?
So moved.
Second.
Chris will take the roll.
Councilmember Galloway?
Yes.
Councilmember McIntyre?
Yes.
Councilmember Hull?
Yes.
Councilmember Rowe?
Yes.
This is the time, place, and date set for a public hearing on proposed ordinance number 3191, 2022, amending the subdivision code to promote and simplify the development of new housing by amending sections 33101, 33106, and 33108 of the municipal code of the city of Ottumwa, Wapello County, Iowa.
I'll go ahead and open the public hearing, and Zach, you're up again.
All right, thank you, Mayor. It's good we just heard rain because I think these next two might take a little bit of time, but we've got nowhere to go. So when we did the 2022 Ottumwa Housing Plan, RDG Planning and Design, who prepared the plan, also prepared a code review memo with some recommendations for improvement to the city code that would execute the recommendations and the vision of the study. The main goal there being 500 units of housing before 2030. Some of those revisions related to the subdivision ordinance, and so all of those are included here. The subdivision ordinance addresses the process of approving a plat that divides property into 3 or more lots. New subdivisions would allow for areas for new development to be divided into lots to build homes, and these changes seek to make that process easier for developers and to allow subdivisions that are still harmonious with the existing development we have in the community. There's 3 changes to the code that are included in this ordinance. The first is section 1. Currently the code does not allow for alleys in new subdivisions. They're expressly prohibited. This change would encourage alleys in subdivisions. They wouldn't be required, but they would be encouraged. And also it would require that where there are alleys, except where justified, subdivisions would locate their utilities in those alleys. There's a couple of benefits that we see to allowing alleys. The first is for the utilities. Makes it easier to service without tearing up the street. It also makes it easier potentially to do street work without interacting with those utilities. The second, though, and the reason that RDG recommended alleys was that it allows for more flexible, creative arrangements and solutions for parking that can maximize space in affordable developments. I was just in Iowa City last weekend, and I went to somebody, they live in a townhome development, and they have an alley that runs behind the townhome, and everybody gets to their unit through a garage that's in the back. That development would be illegal, at least as the code is written right now in Ottumwa. So we're allowing for the flexibility to do things like that. Section 2, currently the code requires subdivisions to have lots which are at least 60 feet wide, 100 feet deep, and 7,000 feet in total area. This change would allow any lot dimensions that conform to the minimum size for the zoning district in which the subdivision is located. Again, this allows for some flexibility. Smaller lots, if those lots are allowed in that zone, should be allowed in the subdivision if somebody wants to build to that. It doesn't set a minimum, or it doesn't set a maximum. You can build whatever you feel like, but it does allow for some flexibility on the minimum. The third, this is section 3. It removes the authority of the planning commission or the city council to impose additional rules that would protect, quote, the character of proposed subdivisions. RDG noted that any of these requirements would be imposed late in the process after developers have already sunk significant cost into developing preliminary plats, and they would be a deterrent for anyone doing the development in the first place. The code already describes the elements that we would consider important, parking, street design, lot size, etc. And so having the ability to add those restrictions late in the process is opening up opportunities for some arbitrary decision-making. It's also serving as a disincentive. And I guess just with a note, it has been quite a long time since we've done a new residential subdivision in Ottumwa. And it would certainly be great to have a role in encouraging more of that activity.
Does council have any questions for Zach? Does anyone in the audience have any questions for Mr. Simonson? If not, I'd entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Chris will take the roll.
Councilmember Galloway?
Yes.
Councilmember McIntyre?
Yes.
Councilmember Hull?
Yes.
Councilmember Rowe?
Yes.
Ordinance number 3191, 2022, amending the subdivision code to promote and simplify the development of new housing by amending sections 33101, 33106, and 33108 of the municipal code of the city of Ottumwa, Wapello County, Iowa. Recommendation passed the first consideration of ordinance number 3191, 2022.
Do we have a motion to approve the recommendation?
So moved.
Second.
Chris will take the roll.
Councilmember Galloway?
Yes.
Councilmember McIntyre?
Yes.
Councilmember Hull?
Yes.
Councilmember Rowe?
Yes.
This is the time, place, and date set for a public hearing on proposed ordinance 3192, 2022, amending the zoning code to promote and simplify the development of new housing by amending sections of the municipal code of the city of Ottumwa, Wapello County, Iowa.
I'll go ahead and open the public hearing. And Zach, I believe you're taking this one as well.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. This one's going to take longer. This is probably the biggest in number of changes, single ordinance that I've done since I've been here. I think process-wise, it might be best if you interrupt me after I talk about a section, if you have questions, so that way I don't get to section 17 and you had a question about section 4. Also, most of these changes came from the code review memo that we worked on with RDG. And also several of these changes relate to the so-called missing middle housing issue that's described in the study, a lack of housing that's affordable to middle income families. And one of the recommendations that was in the study, one of the core recommendations was developing middle density infill that would help to meet that need. Middle density infill would be housing which is multifamily on the same lot, but is of lower density. It's not large apartment buildings, it's small apartment buildings, cottages, townhomes, things like that. And so there are references in this study to housing opportunity infill development. And that's the term that we used to apply to development that is based on an approved site plan. This is a project we've talked a little bit about and we'll actually talk about again at the end of the agenda. But the idea is we would create an administrative process in the code for these middle density infill units. You can build them by right as long as you build to a site plan that is approved by resolution by the council. And so those references are going to be included in here. And infill, of course, that would only apply then to existing neighborhoods. Our infill opportunities are the ones in our sort of Swiss cheese neighborhoods where we've taken down a house here and there are vacant lots in an existing development. A subdivision could still build these types of housing depending on the nature of the subdivision, but it wouldn't be according to that administrative process. It'd be according to what they can do by right. I'll go through the changes. Actually, I'll do one more thing before I go through the changes. I did give everybody today before the meeting an amendment. I'll describe what's specifically in that amendment when we get to it. The Plan and Zoning Commission unanimously recommended the ordinance last night with the recommendation that you consider that amendment. And we'll talk about that. The staff recommendation, though, would be to adopt the ordinance as it was submitted to you. But I think it's ultimately up to you if you want to consider that amendment. We'll talk about it when we get there. And it's not a terrible amendment. The ordinance is still good with or without the amendment. We'll go through the changes. Section 1. Section 1 just creates a definition for infill development and for housing opportunity medium density infill. The way our zoning code works, it's regular Euclidean zoning. It divides the city up into zoning districts. Every property is inside of some kind of zoning district. We define all the different use types. Any way that somebody could use property, we try to think of and create a definition for in the code. And then there's a matrix that says each use type, you can use it in it takes each use type and it takes each zoning district and it says whether you can use it in that use or whether you can do that in that zoning district. And so this creates a definition for that type of infill. Section 2 adds housing opportunity medium density as a use type. And Section 3 adds it to the zoning use matrix. It says that housing opportunity medium density infill be permitted in zones R1 through R5, C1 through C3, and I1 according to supplemental regulations, and those are established in Section 19. I think it's actually 15, but we'll get to it when we get there. And you'll kind of see as you look at that Section 3, especially what I mean with that use matrix. P means that it's permitted in that zone. Blank means that it's not permitted. If there were a C, that would mean it's permitted by conditional use permit. If there were an X, that would mean that there's something in the code that expressly prohibits it, which is the same thing as not being prohibited, but it does make it even harder to ever get rezoned or something like that for that type of use. Going on to Section 4. This section clarifies that mixed-use buildings and mixed-use development are permitted in zones C1 through C4 and I1, provided that each use type is permitted in the zone. Mixed-use development is when development that shares the same lot or shares the same building has multiple use types. This could be a shop on the first floor and an apartment upstairs. It could be a restaurant on the first floor and a nightclub upstairs. Those sorts of things are mixed-use development. And we've already interpreted that that's prohibited or that that's allowed, but this does spell it out clearly that mixed use is permitted in those zones as long as the uses that you're including on the property are all permitted in that zone. You can mix the uses. Section 5, this section's kind of interesting. Our zoning code includes language about R160 and R170 zones where the minimum lot width is 60 or 70 feet. We don't have any zones that are R160 or R170 currently in the city. All we have is R150. So this eliminates those. It makes the same standard for all R1. It also makes a couple of changes to that. It sets the minimum at 50 feet, and then it sets the minimum area at 6,000 square feet per lot. New development can go larger, but that reflects the size of our existing neighborhoods. It also adds regulators, and you'll see this in a lot of the subsequent changes. It adds regulators for housing opportunity, medium density infill. For each of them, lot area, yard size, all of them, they'll say none, and they'll refer back to that first footnote that all housing opportunity, medium density infill should comply with Section 38870E, which is later on in the ordinance. Section 6 also adds regulators. Section 6 through 11 will all add those regulators for each of these zoning districts. A couple of notes I will make here, though. One quirk, I guess, that you could say in our zoning code, or one thing that is very strange and has caused us a lot of heartache, is that our R2 zoning district, where you're allowed to build duplexes, where it's supposed to allow for higher density, has actually a larger minimum lot width requirement than our R1 zone. You have to have 60 feet of width currently in the R2, even though it's supposed to be more dense. And what that's resulted in is situations where somebody goes to buy a home and we routinely have to provide the bank letters that say they can rebuild that home if it burns down, even though it's non-conforming. And they can only do that if they start within a year. So it is even a little bit of unnecessary risk introduced on to our taxpayers, but we do routinely have to deal with that issue when people are trying to buy homes. And it doesn't make any sense. If it's a zone where it's supposed to allow for higher density, it shouldn't be larger required size than the zone that's supposed to allow lower density.
So Zach, just to clarify, right now they can't build on a lot that's lower than 60. Is that what this is saying? And
Right.
by doing this, we're going to allow them to build on a lot that's 50 foot wide or wider.
Right.
And before they had to get like a variance or something like that,
They would have had to get a variance.
which was a long process and took forever. Okay.
And
So
takes a
this is
fee.
going to clean up that, and this is going to allow us to, some of those houses we've tore down in the past that needed to go can now be built on those lots.
Those lots will be useful again. Yep.
Awesome. Thank you.
And so that's sections 6 through 11. There isn't anything else to add about those. They all do that same type of thing. They adjust that minimum size kind of discrepancy, and they add the regulators from housing opportunity, medium density, infill. So the next would be section 12 that we want to talk about. Section 12 addresses the CS1 district. This is our commercial shopping center district. This is basically the Quincy Place area and Venture Drive area. This adds townhouse and housing opportunity as permitted uses, adaptive reuse for malls and other large retail into housing, or with housing sort of on the fringe of a large shopping development, is a growing trend. And this is going to allow us to capitalize on that for the mall area if we do get projects together that would work that way. Section 13 is also related to the CS1 zoning district. It affects parking requirements. It reduces the required parking in CS1 from 4 to 5 spaces per 4 or 5 spaces per 1,000 square feet down to 3 spaces. RDG recommended this to incentivize development. Most of the existing CS1 zones already paved regardless, but this would provide the possibility of using existing parking on the fringe for housing. It would also provide an incentive for new development parking, and we'll talk about this a little later too, is one of the largest determinants of whether a project can get off the ground. The size of the parking lot, as Kurt said, concrete going up so much is only making it worse. The size of the parking lot's a huge cost, but it's also plays into how much space and how much money do you have to spend on detention for a project when you pave a lot of space. And they've kind of looked at the parking we have. They've acknowledged that especially in that zone, we have surplus parking, and they recommend reducing that a little bit. Section 14, another, we call them quirks because we don't like to complain about whoever was here before. Another quirk of our zoning code is that the I1 zone permits residential uses, but it doesn't have any regulators. This would just make the regulators the same as R5, our highest density, but it would at least allow us to have something to refer to when somebody wants to build a house in an I1 zone. And that's important because Ottumwa is a funny city in a zoning map context too, because we have a lot of areas that are zoned I1 that are just packed full of housing. We have a lot of areas that are zoned C1 that are just packed full of housing, right? So we want to be able to have a zoning code that lives with the community that it's in. Over time, you might see us bring recommendations to downzone some of those areas as well, making this less of an issue, but right now it's causing us issues. Section 15, this is the section that adds the supplemental regulations related to housing opportunity, medium density infill. So supplemental regulations are the section of the code where it says if there's anything beyond is this allowed or is this not allowed, there's additional regulations. It refers them to this section. This is the section that says new car lots have to be on paved surface, that sort of thing. So this adds housing opportunity, medium density infill, for which a building permit has been issued on or before the date of this chapter adoption. We couldn't have issued a permit before that because the program doesn't exist. Should comply with the following minimum design standards. All development shall conform to a prototype site plan included in the medium density site plan prototypes that are established by resolution. So this is the process I kind of described before. You can build by right whatever's in the site plan as long as that site plan has been approved by the council by resolution. And that's a good sort of shortcut opportunity to get that infill development in where we can do it without having to do the variances and the other processes. It opens that up a little more. Section 16. This one has a couple of changes. Yeah, this one actually has quite a few changes. This is related to accessory uses on residential properties. And there's a few things we change here. The first is for accessory dwelling units. They used to call them mother-in-law cottages. This is where you build a second dwelling unit in the backyard, or you build it above the garage, those sorts of units. the code right now requires that your lot is at least 1.5 times the minimum lot for that zoning district before you can build an accessory dwelling unit. This change would allow you to build an ADU on a lot that is at least the minimum size. So if your lot is supposed to be at least 6,000 square feet and your lot is 6,000 square feet, you can't build one now. You could build one after this change. It also makes a couple changes to home-based occupations that I want to talk about. This is really not entirely related to housing, although it does make Ottumwa maybe a more friendly place to be. We did make a couple of changes to home-based occupations because we were in this code. The first is that the code currently does not allow you to do a home-based occupation out of a garage or any other accessory building. It has to be in the main building. There's not really a practical reason for that I can really think of. What it's resulted in is a lot of weird outcomes where people will build a breezeway to attach a detached garage to their house or something like that that's really unnecessary. But this would allow, if you're going to run a hair salon out of a garage, you can do that attached or detached. It's the same thing. And then we do make two changes about what uses are allowed. The first is that we remove from the list of prohibited uses licensed firearm vendors. Right now, licensed firearm vendors are a prohibited home-based occupation. We've actually had to reject an application that was related to that before. But as long as you're complying with the parking, as long as you're complying with the requirements of being a licensed vendor, we don't really see a reason why you wouldn't be able to do a business where you sold guns by mail from home or where you had no more than one person come and purchase a gun in the home. There's not really a reason to prohibit that. And so we removed that. We also added motorized vehicle sales to the list of prohibited occupations. It probably would have been prohibited before for all the other reasons, but we just wanted to make it really clear that it's not compatible to have a primary use dwelling with car sales as there might have been in the past. The last is section 17, and section 17 is the one that has an amendment proposed. So plan and zoning, or first, there's one change in section 17 before the amendment. The first change in section 17 is related to mixed use, which we talked about before. If there are mixed uses that have different operating hours, so this could be the scenario of a boutique on the first floor, a nightclub upstairs. The boutique is closed before the nightclub opens. This code change would allow you to reduce up to 50% of the required parking if those uses are shared. So you can build a little bit less parking if there's no reason that people are going to use both uses at the same time. And then section 17 also includes a change that they did make a suggested amendment out of plan and zoning. That relates to the minimum parking required for multifamily residential. Right now, the code requires 1.5 spaces per unit for multifamily residential. If you go by Washington Apartments, there's vacant parking spaces. It was an issue of consternation that resulted probably in a higher cost and possibly even a higher need for a rebate for Bonita, that we were requiring parking that they knew that their customers were not going to need. So we did propose reducing that requirement to 1 space per dwelling unit, which is the same as what's required for single family and duplex. Plan and Zoning Commission was concerned about reducing parking, and they did propose the amendment that I gave you today, which would reduce that still, but it would only reduce it to 1.25 spaces per unit instead of 1. So go from 1.5 to 1.25. The ordinance is written goes from 1.5 to 1. Kind of as said before, parking is a huge determinant on when a project can happen. It's a huge determinant on how much incentive a project needs. And has environmental effects on what has to be detained and that sort of thing, which also come with their own cost. Last thing is just there's a couple of really small changes in here as well. Community recreation facilities. This regulator used to say 1 space per 15 mobile homes. We've seen community recreation in other types of uses as well. So if there is going to be community recreation, we've added parking to serve that use, even if that community recreation is in apartments or things like that. And I think it is a good trend that we've seen playgrounds and things like that coming into multifamily as well. And then it does just refer back again to section 38.870 that parking for housing opportunity medium density shall comply to the site plan. That's the summary of all the changes. This cumulatively results in a lot of substantial changes that will make it, I think, easier for folks to get housing projects off the ground in Ottumwa. That'll make it friendlier for folks that are already in a situation where they want to buy an existing house that's on a smaller lot, as we have a lot of. And I think it will move us in the right direction to achieving our goals around housing. The staff recommendation, as I said, we don't recommend the amendment. We are comfortable with the one space per unit for multifamily, but we also understand that parking is something that people are always anxious about. They'd rather require more and be sure that there's nobody parking on the street or anything like that. So whichever way you want to handle that amendment is reasonable, but that is our recommendation.
I just have one quick question. So on section 17, what happens if for the mixed use, if they overlap by an hour or 2 hours, do they still need to have the more parking spaces?
So probably is the short one. We could look at something where maybe we put it in front of plan and zoning when they do site plan review, and plan and zoning can say, you know, what is your peak hours? What's the percentage you anticipate in the last hour of being open? Say, for example, you have a dinner service restaurant and a tutoring place. They might be open most of the day and they might only overlap between 3 and 5, but that 3 and 5 is probably peak business for the tutoring service. So that's probably not going to be sufficient to reduce parking. But other cases, it could be a little different. And that's why site plan review exists a little bit, is to tackle some of those stickier case by case issues. And it does say up to 50% reduction. So that could be a case where we reduce it by a little still.
Does council have any other questions for Zach regarding any of these proposed code changes?
So on 16, we took out motor vehicle sales for the people that are currently doing that. They're grandfathered in though, is that correct? Or will they be required to cease that business?
There's nobody right now that I know of that is doing motor vehicle sales as a home-based occupation.
Okay.
There's one case where a dealer extension lot is on the same lot as a placarded home, but it's not a home-based occupation. It's just an eyesore.
So that wouldn't cover that lot?
Probably not.
Okay, so we don't actually have any of that. Okay, thank you.
Does anyone in the audience have any questions for Mr. Simonson? If council has no further questions, I would recommend or ask for a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Chris will take the roll.
Councilmember Galloway?
Yes.
Councilmember McIntyre?
Yes.
Councilmember Hull?
Yes.
Councilmember Rowe?
Yes.
So Jenna, are you still on the line? Jenna?
I think what she would say was that at this time,
So if council wants to approve the amendment, they need to vote on that before we do the first reading of the ordinance.
Okay, so I think that if that would make the most sense, yes.
If you guys want the amendments but again, base it on what Zach presented to you.
I would move to approve the amendment. I think parking is always an issue for our citizens and we hear a lot about it. So I would make a motion to approve the 1.25 spaces.
Is there a second?
Second.
Chris will take the roll.
Councilmember Galloway?
Yes.
Councilmember McIntyre?
Yes.
Councilmember Hull?
Yes.
Councilmember Rowe?
Yes.
Ordinance number 3192, 2022, amending the zoning code to promote and simplify the development of new housing by amending sections 3141, 3874, 38115, 38117, 38206, 38236, 38266, 38,296, 38,326, 38,386, 38,418, 38,453, 38,457, 38,585, 38,870, 38,876, and 38,940 of the Municipal Code of the City of Ottumwa, Wapello County, Iowa. Recommendation passed the first consideration of ordinance 3192, 2022.
Move the recommendations presented.
Second.
Chris will take the roll.
Councilmember Galloway?
Yes.
Councilmember McIntyre?
Yes.
Councilmember Hull?
Yes.
Councilmember Rowe?
Yes.
This is the time, place, and date set for a public hearing on the proposed ordinance number 3193, 2022, granting an electric transmission franchise to ITC Midwest LLC.
I'll go ahead and open the public hearing, and I believe Mr. Seals is going to present on this one.
Thank you, Mayor. This is proposed ordinance that will grant ITC Midwest LLC, its successors and assignees the right of non-exclusive franchise to acquire, construct, erect, maintain, and operate in the city of Ottumwa, Iowa, an electric transmission system for a period of 25 years. After setting the hearing, I did add some description of what the company is, just for your information below.
Council have any questions for Mr. Seals?
Just Larry, thank you for the description. So I know what we're talking about here.
Okay, does anyone in the audience have any questions for Mr. Seals? If not, do we have a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Second.
Chris will take the roll.
Councilmember Galloway?
Yes.
Councilmember McIntyre?
Yes.
Councilmember Hull?
Yes.
Councilmember Rowe?
Yes.
Ordinance number 3193, 2022, granting to ITC Midwest LLC, its successors, and assigns the right and non-exclusive franchise to acquire, construct, erect, maintain, and operate in the city of Ottumwa, Iowa, an electric transmission system for a period of 25 years. Recommendation passed the first consideration of ordinance number 3193, 2022.
Do we have a motion to approve the recommendation?
So moved.
Second.
Chris will take the roll.
Councilmember Galloway?
Yes.
Councilmember McIntyre?
Yes.
Councilmember Hull?
Yes.
Councilmember Rowe?
Yes.
This is the time, place, and date set for a public hearing on the proposed ordinance number 3194, 2022, establishing a one-year moratorium on the issuance of certificates of zoning compliance for new applications for used motor vehicle dealer lots and new applications for dealer extension lots.
Move the recommendation as presented.
Second.
This is a public hearing.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
I'll open the public hearing, and I believe Zach is going to do this presentation.
Thank you, Mayor. At some commission meetings and also in one-on-one conversations, I think with some of the council members, interest was expressed in establishing a moratorium on new used car dealerships and dealer extension lots. A moratorium was established in 2015 that was later repealed. This ordinance would reestablish that moratorium for up to 1 year, which would allow staff to take some time to revisit the regulations we have and try to do some other things. One thing that we've looked at is trying to identify possibly requiring that new used car lots can't be located within a certain distance of residential use and some things like that. Kind of the issue I addressed before about Ottumwa having some interesting zoning quirks is that we have a lot of friction sometimes between our residential uses and some of our commercial uses. And that's really played out in having issues that relate to health, safety, welfare, and morals around car dealership. That's the language in the ordinance. The ordinance would function in order to get a car dealership, a used car dealership or a dealer extension lot. You have to get a license from the DOT. To get the license, you have to get a certificate of zoning compliance from the city. This would basically function if we got applications for a new used dealer license or dealer extension lot. We would reject the certificate of zoning compliance, we'd return a letter that says that there's currently a moratorium and we can't issue that. Plan and zoning did hear this last night at their April 4th meeting. They did recommend adopting the ordinance on a vote of 5-3, which is a tighter vote than they usually have. And they did recommend that only with the amendment that I gave you today. In this case, staff does recommend adopting the amendment. The amendment creates an exemption for an existing dealer lot that is sold to a new owner. If there's an existing lot and that owner wants to retire, or that owner sells that to somebody else, it doesn't create any new issues that would be related to the issues we're regulating in the moratorium. So we do feel comfortable creating an exemption for that. So that's the language that's in green in the amendment. And I do want to say, so the discussion last night there was a lot around it. I do want to repeat a couple of the arguments that were opposed to it so the council can hear that point of view and think about it. Probably the strongest argument that was in opposition was that a moratorium basically creates a competitive advantage for dealerships that exist now. They can't get any new competitors, even if those competitors were going to follow the rules. And so the proposal was, why not try to make changes without the moratorium? We do still support the moratorium because basically we think that if you're taking on water, you should plug the hole before you start bailing out. But stopping the issue and then taking the time to solve it, being more practical than trying to solve it in the middle, has an appeal. And so we do recommend the ordinance, but to get everybody both sides, it's a tough thing to do. I know that Jenna and Christine don't do a lot of moratoriums because it is a tough thing to do, to go and say, we're going to restrict uses that you can do with property, and we're going to create these sorts of restrictions. So it does have to be for a really good reason. And we do think there is some issues around these.
Zach, can you say one more time what the opposition was?
Yeah.
I just want to make sure I understood it fully.
Yeah, the strongest argument that I kind of heard in opposition was that you acknowledge there's a problem right now. A moratorium does not apply to anyone who's open right now. So the people who are causing issues right now are able to continue to cause issues all year. And the only difference is that they can't have any competitors, new competitors who might follow the rules, especially when you're thinking about car lots that have been grandfathered to operate on gravel or been grandfathered where they don't have screening. Some of those requirements that we've added later on, a new competitor would have to be on gravel or would have to be on hard surface. Would be basically possibly creating a competitive advantage for the dealer who is not doing as good of a job as what the next one might do.
So I'll just tell you, I'm super happy for this, and I disagree with the opposition to that. We've been talking about this for years now, about the state of the car dealerships in Ottumwa. I can think of 4 neighborhoods right off the top of my head where car dealerships have completely destroyed the neighborhoods. So, and the not having the moratorium in place and just trying to patch the problems along the way has really created the demon that we have now. So I agree with you that this helps us plug that hole and fix it correctly the first time, as opposed to doing patchwork along the way that has really exacerbated the problem.
And piggyback off of that, this is a 1-year moratorium. It's not like we're putting a 10-year moratorium in place. We're just doing 1 year. That'll give us time to go over the ordinances and stuff. So, 1 year is not going to, it's not going to drive prices up that high. So, and we have like 30 car lots, used car lots.
We did issue a new certificate of zoning compliance today.
Does council have any other questions for Zach? Does anyone in the audience have any questions for Mr. Simonson? If not, I'd entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Chris will take the roll.
Councilmember Galloway?
Yes.
Councilmember McIntyre?
Yes.
Councilmember Hull?
Yes.
Councilmember Rowe?
Yes.
And again, did somebody want to make a motion to approve the amendment?
I'll make the motion to approve the amendment as presented.
Second.
Chris will take the roll.
Councilmember Galloway?
Yes.
Councilmember McIntyre?
Yes.
Councilmember Hull?
Yes.
Councilmember Rowe?
Yes.
Ordinance number 3194, 2022, establishing a one-year moratorium on the issuance of certificates of zoning compliance for new applications for used motor vehicle dealer lots and new applications for dealer extension lots. Recommendation passed the first consideration of ordinance number 3194, 2022.
Do we have a recommendation, motion to approve the recommendation?
Move the recommendation as presented.
Second.
Chris will take the roll.
Councilmember Galloway?
Yes.
Councilmember McIntyre?
Yes.
Councilmember Hull?
Yes.
Councilmember Rowe?
Yes.
This concludes our public hearings. Before we get into resolutions, I would ask if the council would like to take a brief recess, or do you want to keep moving forward? Okay, we'll keep moving forward.
Resolution number 84, 2022, authorizing all transfers for fiscal year 22. Recommendation pass and adopt resolution number 84, 2022.
Do we have a motion to approve the recommendation?
So moved.
Second.
And I believe Phil and Ortina is going to handle this.
Yes, so this resolution was prepared in order to comply with City Finance Committee rules, so under Chapter 545 of the Iowa Code. So these are budgeted transfers. They were attached for review, and they were included in the fiscal year 2022 budget. So basically, this is just making sure that all transfers that were addressed are done in compliance and that they're officially approved by council and will be made and included as part of our audit process.
Tina, do you have any comments you want to add?
It's a cleanup.
Any other questions from council for Phil or Tina? If not, Chris will take the roll.
Councilmember Galloway?
Yes.
Councilmember McIntyre?
Yes.
Councilmember Hull?
Yes.
Councilmember Rowe?
Yes.
Resolution number 92, 2022, awarding the contract for the Apron 2022 Improvements Project for the Ottumwa Regional Airport to Winger Contracting Company of Ottumwa, Iowa, and the amount of $228,853.25. Recommendation pass and adopt resolution number 92, 2022.
Move the recommendation as presented.
Second.
Chris will take the roll. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Yes, JD's going to speak first. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. This project will replace the apron area that's been in existence since 1945 when it was a naval base. 5 bids were received on this, the highest of $415,445 and the lowest of $228,853.25. Bids were checked and reviewed by our consulting engineer, Kirk Michael, and our Airport Advisory Board. Staff recommends that we award this to Winger Contracting of Ottumwa, Iowa at $228,853.25 as the lowest bidder. The Iowa DOT grant will reimburse the city for 85% of the final project amount, and the city will be responsible for the final 15% out of our airport fund balance.
Does council have any questions for JD? If not, Chris will take the roll.
Councilmember Galloway?
Yes.
Councilmember McIntyre?
Yes.
Councilmember Hull?
Yes.
Councilmember Rowe?
Yes.
Resolution number 95, 2022, approving an agreement with Greater Ottumwa Partners in Progress for the period of April 2022 through June 30th, 2023, and authorize the mayor to sign on the behalf of the city of Ottumwa. Recommendation pass and adopt resolution number 95, 2022.
Do we have a motion to approve the recommendation?
So moved.
Second.
Phil, I believe you're going to take the lead on this.
Yes, and we do have a couple members from the GoPip board and staff here as well. If there's any additional questions or comments that they want to make, Shay Griner and Mike Sprower here. So previously, the city had contracted with Ottumwa Economic Development Corporation for support economic development services on behalf of the city. OEDC is one of the organizations that eventually merged and created GoPip. And then that OEDC agreement had gone to GoPip December, I think, of 2019, November, December, and that was to expire on June 30th, 2020. At that same time, there was an overlap with the creation of GoPip. The city was paying in towards the creation of that, and for the economic or the executive director position, that was three-way between the city and then two parts of legacy that were contributing to that. That ends this year, and so at that point, we would have no further financial support to GoPip. However, we do still have a need for economic development services, and there's one thing, and we still have a developer here, is that once things get to this level, all of the talk and all of that is in the public realm. And there's a lot of times where you have developers are feeling things out. They want to know what might be, and Zach actually referenced this earlier, where there are probably 10 to 1 ideas and things coming forward before city staff or GoPip, and 1 out of every 10 or so actually come to fruition and get to this level. Having a place like GoPip to be able to have conversations and vet things and to see what might be available. If you have a business that's looking at expanding, to not have to, or potentially looking at relocating, to not have their employees fearing if they're going to have a job tomorrow or not, when you're looking at opportunities that may or may not be available, this provides that avenue. And so there's a lot of advantage to having an agreement like this. One of the things I recognized from the prior agreement was there wasn't a lot in the way of accountability or deliverables. It was essentially an agreement that the city was going to pay and we're going to receive economic development services, but it really wasn't defined as to what was going to be received there. This goes a long way to trying to help. I wouldn't say it's all in, it's all inclusive, it's all done. It is about 15-month agreement, so it's will get us onto our fiscal year, and then also it's essentially 5 quarters. So it'll be the remainder of this year and then the next 4 quarters or next year. And we'll continue to work through this. We have new leadership at GoPip, and they're taking a new direction in some ways. So there's a lot of exciting things going on there. And I think it would be good for us to be able to help support that and receive some value from that at the same time. And I don't know if either Mike or Shay had some comments or wanted to address the council on the agreement. Okay, or answer questions that the council may have, and I can answer questions as well. So the agreement was drafted from the past agreement, added some things to that, has been reviewed by our legal counsel, and like I said, I mean, this will continue to be a work in progress, but I think it takes us a lot further than where we were before, and adds some value back to the city. And with that, I guess I'll turn it over to the mayor.
Does council have any questions that they'd like to ask Phil or the GoPip staff that are here this evening?
Phil, just one question for you. So it says it runs through June 30th of next year.
Yes.
I'm assuming, just for my benefit, this is kind of a rollover agreement. We can cancel it at the end of the year, or it just rolls over, or do we need to do a new contract in a year?
We would do a new one at that point, I believe. And then there's I think it's a 90-day out by either party. So if things aren't working, there'd be a way out. So it would end at the end of that term unless we were to continue that relationship. So there's an opportunity to make revisions to that. And
Worst case scenario.
Yep.
Were you going to talk about the additional special projects?
yes, I'm sorry. Thank you, Mayor. That's what I was just looking at here. So, so the base of the agreement is $40,000 for the year, or $10,000 a quarter. And like I said, it's looking at 5 quarters, so that would be a total of $50,000, $10,000 each of those quarters.
Wait, it says 40,000, 40.
Yeah, it's based off of a $40,000 annual contract, but like I said, it's for 5 quarters. So it's this quarter, the rest of this year, and then next year, the 4 quarters at 10,000 each. So let's see. Then the special projects, there are a couple of things that are in here that could be over and above that $10,000 per quarter. And there's special projects. So one is a Church Street rehabilitation up to $5,000. So assisting with that coordination of that and updating Church Street. We have in our plans, if it's the facades or the rear of Church Street businesses that face the river, trying to really help with that corridor there. Bless you. GoPip website redesign. There was some additional information in number 2 on Appendix A, up to $10,000 with that. Again, the main point of, or one of the main things with the website for GoPip is economic development and driving that. There's a number of features they're looking at that I think will really help to put them on the map and put the city on the map as a location for economic development, some podcasts and some different things that they're looking at establishing. And then the final project on here is the Women Entrepreneur Event, and that's further described in the appendix as well. One of the things that was identified in the comprehensive plan of the city was focusing on not only economic development, but that diversity aspect of women-owned, minority-owned businesses. And this was something that was being looked at by GoPip, and in order to help with that project, up to $5,000, and we would receive receipts, documentation of what those are, and reimburse based off of that, should that be approved. So that is also in this contract. Thank you. So that could be up to $20,000 in addition to the base contract.
So I have a question. So we're potentially going to give up to $10,000 for a website, but then on rehabilitation for Church Street or only up to $5,000. And it seems a little reversed to me.
Yeah. So the part with Church Street is looking at more like staff time and reimbursing for staff time and assisting with that. The website is something that would be contracted, or is the contract with the website services. So I have less control over what those costs would be. I don't know if maybe Shay is, or Zach have something?
Depends on who they're using for their.
The Church Street project money is matching a grant that's being pursued. So it's a much larger project, but requires a smaller investment. Is probably the short answer to why it's set that way.
Thank you.
So I guess I have some more questions too. I'm sorry, everyone. I know it's getting late. Okay, but there are deliverables in here. However, I don't know how. So I guess when I think of deliverables, I think of a number like this is what we're going to try to meet. Then there's like, go plan to kind of meet those. And I see like some of this is like dates. By this date, we're going to do this. So like one of them is increased number of new investors by 5% by the end of the fiscal year. Do we have a list of like how many investors you have now, so we actually know that that's been met, or retain a minimum of 90% of GoPip investors? And are you watching that to ensure that that is being met? Are you and GoPip meeting regularly to kind of assess where these deliverables are and how far we need to go?
Yeah, so the first part is, yes, we would establish what that baseline is. And the second part is I am representing the city on the GoPIP board. So I do meet on a monthly basis along with Mike Sproul and others that are on the board.
Also, I see the airport assessment and planning. Wasn't that approved a while ago?
Yeah, so this is an ongoing
Ongoing? Okay.
project with that.
I got
The city approved assisting with some of the financial to have that done, but GoPIP was taking the lead on the actual assessment of that. And so, and I thank you for pointing this out. It's a question I know the mayor and I talked about. These items A through I in here are just kind of, they're there to help reference the larger part of number 3 there, talking about things that are identified in the comprehensive plan. So they're there for reference to kind of help identify what that means, just to say that this economic development committee will be created and is going to link these things back to the comp plan, such as some of these things that had been, and as you mentioned, yes, the council approved that. So that has been identified as a thing of importance for the city. And this committee will assist with tying that back to the comp plan and these other deliverables.
I have a question if I could. I don't know who it'd be addressed to, but since I'm probably the only one in the room that don't have a computer and never been on one by myself, can someone explain why it costs $10,000 to re-ramp it? And if after that answer is, how often does this take place?
Yep.
So every so often, a website does need to be redesigned, and $10,000 is actually just a drop in the hat. It could actually cost way more money. Once it's done, it doesn't usually need to be updated for more than 5 to 10 years. But just like technology, you want to update that as often as you can. Right now, the site is not that usable for our investors as well. So we're looking to update that to have some links built into that for our investors. So there's click-throughs to really make it a value to them, which will help us to increase that investor number that you guys are looking at.
Shay, can you explain some of those improvements that you're looking to do?
Yes, you'll have click-throughs to Facebook pages and websites. Right now, just goes to a landing page and doesn't take you much further. That will also give our investors a higher value of seeing how many people are clicking through onto their businesses. Along with the podcast, we'll be able to upload those, so you'll be able to view those as soon as those are done, as well as adding our newsletter. Social media will be a little bit different, and we're really excited about a chat feature. So a lot of times people want the instant gratification, right? So you'll be able to chat with us during our business hours, and we'll be able to get right back to you without you having to make a phone call or drop us an email. So it's really going to take us on to the next level for being connected with our investors and economic development.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions for Phil? If not, Chris will take the roll.
Councilmember Galloway,
Yes.
Councilmember McIntyre,
Yes.
Councilmember Hull,
Yes.
Councilmember Rowe.
Abstain.
Resolution number 97, 2022, releasing a request for qualifications for historic preservation planning professional services to develop a historic preservation plan for the city of Ottumwa, Iowa. Recommendation: pass and adopt resolution number 97, 2022.
Do we have a motion to approve the recommendation?
So moved.
Second.
Zach?
All right, thank you, Mayor. Our Ottumwa 2040 Comprehensive Plan identified a need for a historic preservation plan for the city of Ottumwa. The city's Preservation Commission has become much more active over the last 4 years, and a plan would facilitate their continued progress. $20,000 toward funding a plan is included in the CIP proposal for this year. This resolution will release a request for qualifications for in order to identify a professional services contractor that could develop the plan. Responses would be due May 6th. The plan elements that are included in the RFP are as follows: a strong effort to solicit and interpret public input, including at least community survey and focus groups or listening sessions with residents and business owners in the historic districts. A public policy review that looks at local ordinances, state and federal laws which impact preservation in Ottumwa. And the areas for focus of a policy review are local designation for landmarks of local historical significance, demolition of historically significant properties, and design standards for the zoning overlay district. Number 3, an integrity and existing conditions report on previously identified historic resources, including the 7 historic districts. We also asked them to design a method and financing, we asked them for design method and financing recommendations for Brick Street reconstruction. Basically help the commission understand what that process is like and how that can be paid for. Number 6 is development or description of a model for evaluating the economic impact of historic preservation. We want to find something that we can quantify the benefits of historic preservation, something that we've seen as an element of other plans, and something that would be great for us to articulate why the work that we do in this area has impact. And the last is specific recommendations for the city and its partners, which would be the basis of a work plan for historic preservation for the city of Ottumwa. $20,000 is probably not enough to cover the plan. The idea is that we'll probably need to pursue a certified local government grant from the state to cover the balance, and we might even look at some other funding options as well.
Does anyone on the council have any questions for Zach?
I'm really excited to see this finally coming.
Yes, I am too. If there's no other questions, Chris will take the roll call.
Councilmember Callaway,
Yes.
Councilmember McIntyre,
Yes.
Councilmember Hull,
Yes.
Councilmember Rowe.
Yes.
Resolution number 100, 2022, releasing a request for qualifications for architectural services for missing middle medium density infill and market rate single-family housing site plan prototypes, drawings, specifications, and cost estimates. Recommendation pass and adopt resolution number 100, 2022.
Move the recommendations presented.
Second.
Zach?
Thank you, Mayor. We talked a little bit earlier tonight about housing opportunity, medium density infill with the ordinance. That process, approve a site plan prototype. That's part of what this is. This is a request to have architectural services to develop that site plan prototype. Also, to add value, we're looking at asking not just for the site plan prototype, but asking for design drawings, cost estimates, everything that we can hand over. Design, especially when you're talking about a building or a project that isn't a market, something that's already on the market. Somebody doesn't necessarily, especially if they work in Ottumwa, doesn't have a plan in their back pocket for medium density infill development. So they're going to look at least 6% added cost for design. So this is going to be an incentive if we can provide those construction documents to get the project done. So that's part of this. 50% of this is that we're looking at doing the medium density prototypes and design drawings. Also in meetings with Mission 500, the group that's kind of come together to meet our needs for housing, there's been an identified interest among developers for prototypes for single family housing as well, basically to do the same thing, to reduce design costs and to create opportunities to build more housing. So we're also going to ask them to develop some site plans that we could make available to developers that participate in our Build Ottumwa program, the program that gives the $10,000 economic development incentive. This would be the same thing. So we're looking at creating those prototypes and making them available. You could build something else, but we're going to ask for at least a couple prototypes that people could choose to build in that case too. And we'd prepare the construction drawings and the things that would get those projects off the ground without financing costs. The other thing that we are open to doing with these, and we're going to look at, is if we get a prototype, we've reviewed a prototype or we've reviewed drawings, we don't necessarily have a reason we have to charge building permit review fees for something we've already reviewed multiple times. So that's another area that we could look at, adding a small incentive, either reducing or eliminating those fees for something that's already been reviewed and vetted. And it's just another opportunity to get folks building. So this does release a request for request for qualifications. They'd be due back May 6th. And sort of the deliverables are included in there. We're wanting to see at least 4 medium density infill prototypes with concepts that work on corners as well as interior lots. We kind of want to let the architects have some freedom to come up with ideas, and then ask them to submit the prototype site plans to us before they do the drawings. That way they don't go into drawing and designing something we might not like, but at least see the site plans, let the council vote on those. The ones you like, we'll ask them to do drawings for. For the single family, we're asking for at least 2. We're asking for a concept for a 2-bedroom and a concept for a 3-bedroom house that's suitable for a 50-foot wide lot. And we are asking for an attached garage. That's maybe going to take some creativity because 50 feet, your garage is probably not going to go on the side, but we'll see what they come up with and we'll communicate with them throughout the process. And for both types of projects, we've asked that they provide a quoted fee for additional designs as an alternate option. If it comes back, we are excited, we want to do more, we can add additional, but we want to set that minimum at 4 and 2.
Does
And there-
council have any questions for Zach? If not, Chris will take the roll.
Councilmember Galloway?
Yes.
Councilmember McIntyre?
Yes.
Councilmember Hull?
Yes.
Councilmember Rowe?
Yes.
We're to the point on our agenda for the public forum where individuals who are here can step forward and bring up issues that are not on tonight's agenda. And I believe we have 2 individuals that would like to speak. So I'd ask each of you to come up individually and state your name and your address and what you would like to address to the council.
Tricia and I are here on the same issue. Can we both come up?
Sure. Go ahead and identify yourselves and your addresses, please.
My name is Mark Thompson, 10505 155th Avenue in Ottumwa.
Tricia Ray, 15125 Blackhawk Road. That's where my business is.
Did you get that? Okay. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. We come to talk about the train crossing on North Quincy. You want to stand up beside me? Last year in April, a lot of us had enough with the train blocking the tracks. And anyway, Tricia was instrumental in getting a lot of signatures and getting Mayor Lazio's attention. Jerry Parker, there was several others, Tim Richmond, and we all got together and had a joint phone call.
Excuse me, sir. Can you speak into the microphone so the people at home can hear?
We all got together and had a joint phone call with some of the leaders at Canadian Pacific. They made some promises to make it better. It did improve somewhat. It didn't take care of the problem though. And it's getting back to where it's bad again. We'd like to work towards a solution. Does this clicker work, Edward? Okay. And even though it's gotten bad again, we're really concerned about the KC and Kansas City and Canadian Pacific merger plan. The map looks kind of bleached out up there, but if you see that main artery right in the middle between Kansas City and Chicago, that's the line that comes right through Ottumwa. That's the main line that's going to link all these together. Currently, we've got a problem with 4.2 trains. And go ahead to the next slide. This was Wednesday, same day Tricia had a delay. She was delayed for 35 minutes. I was almost 20 minutes here. Yeah, go ahead, Edward. But you see where it's highlighted. This is a quote from the railroad. They're planning on going from 4.2 trains today to 18.4 trains. That's just going to be crazy. I don't know what the average delay time is. Last Wednesday when Tricia and I was both stopped, it was close to 30-minute average. So if the railroad could keep it down to 15 minutes at 18.4 trains a day, that's still 4.6 hours a day that train crossing is going to be blocked. And that affects emergency management, or not emergency management, emergency personnel, ambulances, fire trucks, police. Next slide, please. This is a DOT traffic count. The last time they did that was in 2018. And the Quincy Blackhawk road there, average daily traffic is 1,250. So you can imagine blocking off that road for that long with that big of a traffic count. Next slide, please. This is what happens if you're on the north side of Quincy and the train blocks and you decide you want to go around. It's 2.8 miles to the next crossing. Half of that is a gravel road. That's your best option if you don't want to sit there and wait. And then you got to have another almost 2 miles back to put you on the course where you was trying to go to. And then, do any of you live out on Blackhawk or travel it daily? I mean, if you could imagine if that was your road that was blocked that much. I mean, I just want you to feel that. Next slide, please. This was a day I decided to go around to that other crossing. Well, guess what? It was blocked too. Yeah. Next slide, please. I did talk with the county road engineer, and he explained to me that the city owns or controls the east side of Quincy, of North Quincy right there, and Wapello County controls the west side. He agreed that it's a problem and something should be done. He said it may be possible to put an overpass in, but he said that he'd have to work, or the county and the city would have to work together, and he'd also have to work with the railroad because the railroad owns the right of way where the tracks are at. So it's just something that none of us can do as Tricia as a business owner, me as a property owner out there. There's really nothing that we can do other than voice our complaints and ask for leadership that can do something. Tricia does own a business. I'd like for her to share a little bit about how that affects the businesses out there.
I've been on Blackhawk for 21 years, and like he said, before the meeting with CP, the train would block the crossings for more than an hour at a time. And after the meeting, it did get better. It's progressively getting worse again. Like he said, I had been blocked, and I have several calls daily. I have 60 plus people come out to my shop alone. So that's 120 cars back and forth per week that cross the tracks, and they are delayed several times. Older folks do not want to go down the gravel road and travel around. It's quite a dangerous situation out there. And that is if it is not blocked. Yes, with this merger, it's going to be too much blockage. We really would like to see something happen. And there's several other businesses out there, and with the pavement that happened to Chillicothe, to the power plant, with the increased traffic through there, that increases the traffic flow also, and they're also blocked.
Yeah, she brings up a good point. Businesses that have big trucks or haul trailers, they get on this little narrow road and they get blocked. There's no way for them to turn around. I mean, it's hard enough just for a small pickup to turn around there and go around. So we're just at the mercy of waiting. It's really frustrating because you pull up and if the train's already blocked, you don't know how long it's been there. You don't know how long you're going to have to wait. And so anyway, next slide, Edward. Another concern of mine is the more that this is going to be blocked, the more traffic being blocked, the more tempting it's going to be for people to break the law. We've through the signal signs and try to beat the train. We already see a lot of people get frustrated after waiting, and they speed off. to go around to try to beat it at the next place. So it is a safety hazard. It's, in my opinion, an antiquated crossing. Most of the crossings that are built today, they do try to integrate an overpass or an underpass. So next slide, please, Edward. And what we're asking from the city council is to appoint a committee that will work with the Wapello County and the Canadian Pacific Railroad and any other state or federal agencies. You know, maybe there's some money out there that can be acquired for this. I know it's going to be a costly fix to either make another road somewhere or to put a overpass at the current place. And so we're asking for you guys to come up with a committee that can work with the county and the railroad and others to seek a resolution for this.
Does council have any questions for Mr. Thompson or Ms. Ria? So do we need to take action on this tonight?
No, you cannot take action because it wasn't on the agenda itself. But and Mr. Thompson knew that we had talked beforehand.
Okay. So you can't gather a committee for working towards a resolution? I didn't do that.
That is something that we may be able to do, but not tonight. There cannot take any official action tonight because it's the first time and it has not been on an agenda.
Okay. And
But we
I
can
know
take your consideration under consideration, and something could potentially be done from there.
Okay. And I know that there's hundreds of other people out there like Tricia and I that are frustrated, and I hope you appreciate we didn't bring them down tonight.
Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate your coming and talking to us tonight. And we could put this on a future council agenda to actually take official action to create a committee and work with the county and the railroad, because obviously there is something that needs to be done. This isn't going to get better on its own.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sounds like a great opportunity.
Is there anyone else in the audience tonight that would like to speak on any item that's not on tonight's agenda? If not, we have no petitions or any other communication that I'm aware of. Is anything else want to be brought up by council? Okay, if not, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Chris will take the roll.
Councilmember Galloway?
Yes.
Councilmember McIntyre?
Yes.
Councilmember Hull?
Yes.
Councilmember Rowe?
Yes.
We are adjourned, and thank you, everybody, for hanging in there with us tonight. I know it was a long meeting, but we got a lot accomplished, so thank you.